Maria Varela, signed the Port Huron Statement in Michigan. From Chicago, went to school in Wisconsin, and wound up in Alabama. And she was there when the Black Panther, the official logo of the Black Panther, was realized, and the first image drawn with a magic marker on a T-shirt. And of course, Francisco Medrano with the UAW in Dallas, Texas, had joined an interracial effort there in Dallas, fighting not only to bring social justice for workers, Mexican and African American workers in the aircraft plants in Dallas, but also to bring equality in the community of Dallas. Francisco Medrano, representing the United Auto Workers, went to Montgomery, Alabama, was involved in the Montgomery bus boycott and in Alabama. He was the bagman for the money that the UAW was using to support the boycott, these caravans of African Americans that boycotting the buses there. He made it off to Selma, Alabama, and made his way back and continued to become active there in Texas. Which brings up the subject of South Texas. Before 1960, there were about 2 million Mexicans in the United States. Not as large as numbers as today. What is it, 46 million in counting? A quarter of them living here in the South. But at this time, the Mexican Americans were almost on the cusp, if you will, of becoming the nation's second largest minority. Now, there had been some very interesting arguments in the courts with respect to Mexican Americans and civil rights, specifically school desegregation cases involving Mexicans, trial by juries, the Hernandez case in 1954. And all of these cases were victorious, but they went nowhere because nobody would apply these legal decisions in Texas, so things remained the same. These cases were argued pro bono. You're looking at civic organizations, 2 of them, Mexican American civic organizations that had no money, unlike the NAACP. Before Hernandez went to the Supreme Court, they were raffling refrigerators and washers and dryers to raise the money to send these folks to pay for the transportation to Washington, D.C. to hear this case, the Hernandez case. Now, Texas, the U.S.-Mexico border, half of it runs through Texas. 2 million people of Mexican descent in the United States, half of them live in Texas. 90% of them live in South Texas. And the situation is extremely dicey, to say the least. There's no social or economic equality in South Texas. This is a problem that goes back to the Texas Revolution of 1836. The problem is especially harsh with respect to violence. As I say in this paper, in the South you had lynching with respect to African Americans. In South Texas you had discrete killings. And by discrete killings, I mean the following. A Mexican picked up and taken to the police station. On the way to the police station, he shoots himself behind the left ear. A Mexican running away, supposedly, and shot in the back. Mexican Americans rounded up and hung from trees until they confessed to crimes that they didn't commit. State patrolmen picking up Mexicans, basically using them as, for target practice, picking them up, having an altercation, and blowing their brains out there on their front steps. These cases of murder were sent to the FBI Civil Rights Division. There was no action taken. Now, there's a long legacy here. As I said, it goes back to the Texas Revolution, but it goes back really to the turn of the 20th century. Right around World War I, in 1915, out of Alice, Texas, there in South Texas, there was an insurgent movement called the Plan of San Diego. And this was an interracial insurgency movement. We had Texas Mexicans calling for liberation, not only for the Mexican people, but for African Americans, American Indians, Asians, and also asking for land for the Mexican people who had been dispossessed, asking for land for black people in the Deep South. In Texas, there's an organization called the Texas Rangers, founded around the Texas Revolution, 1836. They participated in ethnic cleansing. First they went after the Southern Comanche. Then they went after the Mexicans. And it started like this. First, right after the Texas Revolt, right after the Alamo, 1836, they cleaned up the San Antonio area and then moved east toward the Gulf of Mexico. Then they moved to southwest Texas, where I'm from. And then the killing, the matanza, if you will, ended or was finalized in South Texas, north of Brownsville, going all the way up to Corpus Christi. 5,000 Mexicans were killed by the Texas Rangers. And this included men, this included women and children. This is not just men. These are women and children. Now, there was talk this morning about reparations. That figure of 5,000 is more Native Americans that were killed by the U.S. Army during the Plain Indian Wars of the 1870s. There was a movie that came out about 2 or 3 years ago by a filmmaker whose granddaddy was from Mississippi and moved to Stockton, Texas, which is in southwest Texas, right around Eagle Pass, in that area. And Grandpa remembered killing Mexicans. And this gentleman was intrigued by the stories that his granddaddy was telling him about killing Mexicans in South Texas. So he made a film about it called Border Bandits. And it's out now. Well, this movie, Border Bandits, triggered the memory of a lot of Mexican Americans in South Texas, recalling that their granddaddy had been killed by the Texas Rangers. Now, this killing, this ethnic cleansing, this is something that happened that folks didn't want to talk about. And it happened. But if you looked at Texas in the 1940s and 1950s, there was a feeling of demoralization. People were apathetic. They were more than apathetic. They felt bad about themselves, about their plight. And even though there was a movement for social justice in South Texas that was taking off, the people, if you will, the people of South Texas, the Mexican Americans, didn't have the inertia, didn't have the will. They had to be taught, right, to stand on their feet and to fight for the rights. That voting was extremely important. That getting an education was extremely important. Education, I haven't talked about education. The average age of a Mexican American was 4th grade. That was a good education. College education was, of course, getting out of high school. Well, labor plays an important role in all of this, specifically the Texas AFL-CIO. First, it's the Texas Federation of Labor, but then it's the Texas AFL-CIO. And they also believe that we had a huge core of potential voters that could help liberal Democrats in Texas do in the very conservative Southern Democrats, the Dixiecrats there in Texas. And this coalition was made up of liberal Anglo-Texans, African Americans, and now Mexican Americans.